today on the Passionate Pediatric Dentist Podcast.
Look at it as an opportunity to become more innovative with the resources that you have to improve your business so that you're more prepared the next time this ever does happen. Once something's happened once, you have to know and prepare. You know, if that happens again and you're not prepared, that's then on you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Passionate Pediatric Dentist. I'm your host, Dr. Phil Slonkoski. Well, here we are, another week with our practices back in action in different parts of the country. It's been quite an interesting few months, to say the least. I don't know if those words even do justice to the situation that we find ourselves. Now, this podcast for this week is on the topic of debt and finance. I'm bringing Chris Sands back. This was actually a podcast re-recorded on March 18th, which happened to be the day that we had to shut our office down. And it has a bit of a somber intro, I guess, but Chris and I wanted to continue building on the topics of finance, personal finance, your practice finance, and then discuss managing debt. And I can think of no better time than now to have a refreshing and maybe sobering conversation about how we can start to dig ourselves out of debt. Because unfortunately, that's kind of what this shutdown has done, is it has dramatically affected our books, has affected our accounting. And understanding how we can mitigate that, how we can better manage our debt, manage our cash flow, is going to be key and essential for how we survive and thrive during this time and establish a better system and set ourselves up so that we can be better prepared for what comes in the future. Because these are indeed uncertain times. And while I have great hope and faith in my team, nothing is for certain. And I will say personally, sometimes I like to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I know that this series of events has shaken many of us at a core that we never thought possible. But I hope for all of you that listen to this, that you can have hope, that you can recognize that there is a community of peers who have great hope, who have great passion, and are more than willing to help one another survive and thrive during this time. So if in any way you feel overwhelmed and are looking for direction, reach out. PDD has its online community that you can join for free to ask questions and reach out. It's there. We've got close to 200 members, which is awesome. I know that this is a challenging time, and we just want to reinforce the idea that you're not alone. All right, that's enough of a monologue for this podcast. Without further ado, here is a discussion on debt and how to manage debt better in your practice with Chris Sands, one of the co-founders of Profi 2020. Enjoy. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Passionate Pediatric Dentist. And if there's one thing we need right now, it is a lot of passion and energy as we are how do you even put into words, man? I'm once again joined by the one and only Chris Sands from Profi 2020. And, if there was ever a time to talk about anxiety and money, now is the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, we're going through unprecedented times with the coronavirus. Thanks for having me on again, Phil. But some of the principles that we had intended to discuss now more than ever are going to ring true.
Yeah, it's ironic because when we recorded our last episode just a week ago, it had a certain tone to it about knowing how to divide your different accounts. And I would never in a million years have predicted that as we are recording this one, just a very short time after we recorded that one, that suddenly the market is crashing. Oh, it crashed. I mean, can we say it's crashing? I guess it's crashing. The world is the U.S. is going in lockdown in certain parts of the country. The health department forced us to close today. Now, I say forced us because, look, we're a large office and we're trying to see patients with emergencies and get stuff close so we can kind of close out. but it was pretty much like, nope, you guys are done. And that's how we are in the state of Ohio. I know in other states, that's coming, but it just shows that in a short period of time, a lot can change.
It sure does. And it'd be interesting to look back on this conversation, this podcast episode, to see how things played out and what we talk about, what we say today, how it can be applied. But, whatever your opinions are about where we're at today and where we're headed, I think that we need to prepare for the worst, and we will make it through this all together and come out the other side. But I think we're going to come out of the other side in a different world, or at least looking at the world with a different lens, looking at our practices, our business, our finances differently, and how we behave in them because of this. So maybe, you always have to look for the good in things, and maybe this is going to really rattle everyone's cage and focus on creating, a more healthy, prepared balance sheet in their personal lives and in their businesses.
I would hope so. And that's kind of been the discussion that with the last kind of parents that went through, a lot of our discussion was focused on the hope that comes from this. Families are going to be hunkering down and spending time with one another in ways that they usually don't get to. And the behavior changes that this will elicit, my challenge would be that if this doesn't change your behavior, then you need to take time to rethink, because this is all about where you are financially. Nothing is secure, and you can only be prepared as you can. Now, I will say this, the hope, and this is what I kind of left my team with when we had our last kind of team meeting for an indefinite period of time, was, we are fortunate that we are in a business that, come time when we get a reopen, we will have more than enough patients waiting for a long time. Where else do you get to sit there and say, we just had to reschedule 1,000 patients for the next 2 weeks, and those patients are all going to have to go somewhere. We have patients booked out 6 months. This will pass. And now we got to figure out how to get, these few thousand patient appointments in. Like, that's not a bad problem to have. The work is there. We just have to wait till we're allowed to do it.
Correct. And I think that one of the things that's going to be unprecedented, and we're going to see how this plays out, is, in our topic today of discussing debt, the debt is still there too. The debt is waiting for us. The payments are waiting, and it doesn't care necessarily what's happening in the business. So we'll see if there's any kind of outside interventions from our government, or how that works out and how that plays out. And I'm sure that'll create, other future conversations. But I think that from our last podcast, the concept of Parkinson's law, now, we talked about last time, when you have excess of money, or when you have money laying around, expenses and things are attracted to it. Now we're kind of looking at the other side of the coin of, when you have limited money and limited funds, you have to become very innovative in how to make it work. And that's the part that everyone's going to experience and maybe struggle through over this next, kind of unknown period of time. But, we can talk about, in general, how a business is affected by its debt, and these solid, time-tested principles of focusing to pay off debt and save cash in your personal life and in that business. They are, I think, not taken as seriously as they will be after this event. And I think that after this event, and hopefully, listening to this podcast from there on out, I think you have look at it as an opportunity to become more innovative with the resources that you have to improve your business, so that you're more prepared the next time this ever does happen. Once something's happened once, you have to know and prepare. If that happens again and you're not prepared, that's then on you. So I think what I wanted to get across today is, listen, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Any way you cut it, you hear people make comments like there's good debts and bad debts. And while we can talk about which debts are worse than others, at the end of the day, you really need to think of, in the context of your world in dentistry, debt is a form of decay. Okay, it is a constant drain and drag on a business It's a constant drain and drag on your personal finances. It has all kinds of other byproducts that it creates in your life. And every time you take on a debt, you need to understand that you are going to forego some of your future after-tax profits in order to attain something now that you could not afford to pay cash for now. So you will pay more for it. And before you ever sign on that dotted line, taking on a debt, you really should already know when you plan to have it paid off. You should have a payoff date, and that payoff date does not necessarily have to be the payoff date that's given to you in the terms by the lender. You can actually choose your own payoff date. And one of the greatest homework activities that anyone could do from listening to this podcast is go become very friendly with a loan amortization calculator. You know, this is one of those life hacks. If we all have a mortgage at some point in our life, or we have a loan at some various stage of our life, we have debt, we need to understand the mechanics of how those work, because they are not set up to work in your favor. This is a for-profit deal. So understanding the mechanics of how a loan works and becoming familiar with a loan amortization calculator, I think, is one of the most foundational trajectory changes you can make in your life, because most people sign up for a debt way more easily than they pay it off. And I like Bankrate.com. You can just Google Bankrate.com loan amortization calculator. They have some great calculators on there, and you need to go through and play with them. Put your loan terms in, change the terms around, add extra monthly payments, and see how that changes things. You know, last time we talked about a couple of the books that we both have enjoyed reading as business owners, one being Profit First and the other being Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. And, you know, one of the first lines in his book on the subject of debt is, you can't build wealth until you get out of debt. And make no mistake, getting out of debt really does help you build wealth. And that's such a simple statement that's so foundational and true, yet somehow we talk ourselves out of that, and we let others, whether it be investment advisors, family, friends, we let others talk us out of that, you know, there's some debts you can just let them ride, and you need to make sure that you're, you know, putting your money to work for you and investing. Well, one of the greatest ways, if you have a debt and you took debt on, one of the greatest ways to put your money to work for you is to accelerate the pay down, you know, of that debt. While I often, my terminology that I often use with clients is, you know, if you are investing in the market while you have debt, you're not wealth building, you're wealth dabbling. You think and you hope, you know, I'm going to make a return in the market. And this time that we're going through now and all the turbulence in the markets, I think this is really now proving its point. You know, the Dow Jones over the last 30 or 40 days has lost, I think, over 30%. And it's going to take people getting a return of over 40% just to get back to even. Meanwhile, the debt has continued systematically to compound and accrue interest. So people need to understand that in the stock market, there are no guarantees, and you have a variable rate of return and a return on investment. But with debt, it's a one-way street. You have interest that's compounding, you have cash flow payments that are being consumed, and debt is guaranteed. Not only is it guaranteed, it is contractually guaranteed. You signed a contract with every debt you have, whether that's a student loan, auto loan, home mortgage, or business loan. It's contractual, or credit card, it's contractual. And it's compound. So it is the, you know, negative compound effect that's working against your variable effect of what you have in the market. It's a constant negative drain. In addition to that, it needs to be understood that one of the byproducts for any business owner with debt is it creates additional tax that you're not always fully aware of. So the best way to become aware of this is to understand that, number one, debt gets paid off with profits of the business. Okay. When you take on that debt, there's typically some asset linked to it. There's a principal asset that you may have gotten to take some depreciation deductions on. There'll be an amortization that you'll get a deduction for on the loan. But the real deductibility over time on debt, the only new charge is interest. So when you have a debt payment, the only new charge is interest. Therefore, in the IRS's eyes, you're using profits to pay down the principal portion. So every loan payment has a principal and an interest component. That principal component that you're paying down, live by the rule of 40% taxation, okay, over preparing. 40% of that principal payment you owe in taxes, in addition to the payment leaving your business pocket. So we like to say, debt gets paid off with profits. Not only that, debt gets paid off with after-tax profits. And another way of saying that is all debt is paid off with after-tax dollars. So what does that mean? That means you have to set aside the tax. And that's what I call, this is not a technical term, not an accounting term, but I call it a phantom tax. And that is not, it's not related to the technical terms of phantom income. But in my definition, phantom tax is tax that you pay on money that you did not take home or you did not see sitting in your business bank account. So it's tax that on money that already left your business bank account, already left your pocket, and you owe an additional tax on that money. That is the byproduct of debt. Okay, so just always keep that in mind anytime you're signing up for any new debt.
Yeah, because I was going to say here, because the idea, the goal in all this, in terms of a business model, is that you should reach a point where you're not acquiring debt anymore, or that you're sustainable to where you can minimize it. So that, for example, if you're planning growth, you can plan when that growth's going to be, and then just start setting that cash aside. Because once you get to a certain size, the amount of money you can save on interest by saving up that cash, and as you said, because it's after tax, you're going to be setting yourself up for a much quicker rise in terms of overall wealth.
Correct. I think most people think that they can leverage themselves in the beginning, and that that's allowing them to grow faster. It can feel like that, I think, in the early parts, but what you learn over time is the larger you grow, and if you continue to carry debt, it really inhibits your growth. I think the delay that people make in paying off their debt is they feel like there's that better use of that dollar, and they're torn between, should I take this money out of the business? Should I put it to work for me? And when you become a business owner, you have to act differently than the masses. You have to act differently than everyone else. You have to understand that you own an asset already, that business. It's worth something. And you want it to be worth as much as possible. You want it to be profitable. You want it to generate income for you. And you really need to behave differently and have a laser focus on fixing that asset. And really it should be laser focus in the beginning. Save cash and pay off debt. Save cash and pay off debt. Nothing else. And you have to do both at the same time. And so as I knew we were going to discuss debt today, saving cash is something else that I had to write down to remind myself these have to come together. You can never make yourself totally cash poor, because that will just continue the cycle of you having to go into debt. So the reason you went into debt was because you did not have enough cash on hand to buy something for cash. And there are truisms in life and in business, like cash is king. And, again, the cash keeps you out of debt. Cash on hand makes you think more clearly and make wiser decisions. Cash on hand is opportunity money. It attracts opportunities. And I always look to one of our elders, and one of our wise elders in investment and business world, Warren Buffett, and some of his thoughts on debt and cash. Warren Buffett says, "I do not like debt, and I do not like to invest in companies that have too much debt, particularly long-term debt." And a big part of that is because that debt can drastically affect the company's profits and create future cash flow, make future cash flows less predictable. Second thing he says is, as it pertains to cash is to a business like oxygen is to an individual. Cash is never thought about when it is present. The only thing in mind, it's the only thing in mind when it's absent. And when bills come due, only cash is legal tender. Don't leave home without it. So, in dentistry in general, we have a problem. We are highly leveraged. There's a lot of debt. The debt is carried way too long in our careers, and dental practices are cash poor. And this is a perfect recipe for disaster, especially during times that we're about to go through now. And so I'm telling everyone that I work with to hoard their cash, save their cash temporarily, and to even potentially pull cash from any sources that they have, stop all the extra payments, because right now cash is going to be crucial to the longevity of that business. Some businesses will not recover because they were too leveraged and they didn't have any cash at all when they come out the other side. There's going to be a recovery period. But those that have zero debt right now and those that have an abundance of cash on hand, you will see that those are the practices that are confident and reassuring their people, and they understand that, look, this is going to hurt, but we are prepared for it. I've received a lot of messages this week saying, I have a tax savings account flush with cash, and I have, mandatory savings and all kinds of other vacation accounts and pre-planned expense accounts. And honestly, I'm not sweating that much financially during these times, and that they're very thankful that we had those implemented in advance. If you're listening to this and we've come out the other side of it, there's no time like the present to become more innovative and start changing your business and forcing profit, forcing cash savings, and also paying down some of this debt at an increased rate. So mechanics, switching back to the debt, mechanics on the debt. If everyone is familiar with Dave Ramsey, the snowball effect of paying down debt, one of the first things we look at is paying the smallest balances off first. And this is contrary to what most people believe or hear, or what it's contrary really to human behavior. Human behavior, or logic, let's say, logic says we should look at and pay down the debt with the highest interest rate. But behaviorally, we need some wins. We need to see a balance be eliminated. We need to free up and capture a cash flow that was dedicated to a different debt, and we need to snowball that to the next smallest balance. So that should be your strategy. If you have multiple debts right now, not only in addition to that strategy, you may look to consolidate your debts into a one note so that it improves cash flow. But let's say that you have $10,000 a month committed to debts today, and you're able to consolidate your debt into 3 loans into one and re-amortize them. My advice to you is maybe your new payment is $6,000 instead of $10,000. You need to do your best now to pay $10,000 a month, and because you were committed to it before, and hammer an extra $4,000 a month of principal and eliminate that debt sooner. One of the most common questions I get, on that topic of, what order do we pay them in? How do you determine which ones to pay off? So the smallest balance first is one component. But I really thought I wanted to give, my 4 prioritized components of debt payoff. And they're going to be contrary to what you probably believe. When I ask people what's the number one determining factor which debt to pay off first, they typically will say interest rate. The way I look at it is the number one determining factor of which debt has the greatest impact on you is actually the term. So if you run your numbers, you'll see a debt that has a longer guaranteed term, like a 30-year mortgage, is going to have way more guaranteed scheduled interest than a shorter term debt, like let's say a 7-year car loan. It does not matter what the interest rate is. To have a 30-year term compared to a 7-year term, it's guaranteed there's going to be way more compounding effect the longer the term is. So we have to take that into account. The number 2 priority and number 3 priority are kind of interchangeable. Number 2 is what is the balance? So we do look at what is the smallest balance that we have the ability to pay off first. But I tie to it my number 3, which is what's the payment? What is the cash flow? And so if we have 2 debt balances that are fairly close and we're trying to figure out which one is wiser to pay off first, if one of those balances has a greater payment, required minimum payment, a greater cash flow, we will tackle that one first so we can free up more cash faster and get a faster, more positive compounding snowball effect. And then component number 4 is actually the least important, is the interest rate, because the interest rate is actually, it's a trick, and it's actually, you can dictate how much interest you actually pay by learning how to calculate a loan amortization schedule and knowing the impact of interest and how you would change it by you paying extra money on that loan from the day one. So Mark Cuban, another favorite of mine, he says, look, pay off your debt first. Freedom from debt is worth more than any amount you can earn. And I believe that to be true.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, because debt is so saturated and has become such a modern way of life, banking wise, that people don't understand its effect it has on your cash flow, let alone the effect it has on our pricing models. Because, if you think about financing and like new equipment and you take out debt, people often try to figure out, okay, what's a good fee schedule? What they don't understand is that your fee schedule should incorporate, if you know your percentage and your breakdown for what your operating costs are, you need to incorporate buying that new equipment and not just think you're going to finance it. So, I like to take the discussion to that broader point sometimes, because I think, if you're not cognizant of what it costs for you to do what you're doing, don't just sit there and say, okay, there's going to be a debt payment for this new chair in 20 years, so I have to buy a new one. Think of it as, what can I do now to save to buy that in cash so I don't have to pay the debt? Because as we've said at the beginning, you've got to account for a 40% tax and the interest, which is all post-tax dollars in terms of what it has to produce.
Correct. And these are future capital expenditures, CapEx, we like to call them, that, the first step, I think, in any accounting relationship is you learn the history, you look back, you see what have revenue's been like, expenses been like, what kind of assets do you have, what kind of loans do you have, and what are those assets? What are those pieces of equipment? Depreciation, maybe you took it all up front, but you really look at, how long are those things supposed to last? And so what's the shelf life of every piece of equipment you have today? And when is it expected to expire or be outdated? And you then have to take that data from looking back and use it to forecast into the future and think, not just 1 year out, but 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. When will you have to replace that equipment? And a lot of times those are large expenditures, big ticket items. And again, most dental practices don't keep a lot of cash on hand, so they're forced to take out a debt to buy that equipment. Stage 1 of getting out of debt is learning all of the amortization, the priorities, and paying extra. But stage 2 actually has to happen simultaneously. Stage 2 is stay out of debt. And the only way to stay out of debt is to build cash. And so you have to have the habit. I like a simplicity. When you do a calculation of profit and you determine how much of that profit is the owner going to take home, distribute home as a reward for being profitable, you have to determine, is there any profit that we can also leave in the business for good use? And I like to cut it into thirds and say, let's take 2/3 of it and put it toward extra debt pay down. And the other 1/3, Let's put it towards cash savings. And sometimes this can be difficult, and people, when they think something's difficult, they just never get it started. You have to do the opposite effect. You have to force yourself to do it, and you need a profit account or a cash savings account for future stuff. And maybe you need to put it at another bank, and you just need to automate a payment to that and force yourself to know that's a cash flow that the business cannot afford to let slip by. Otherwise, you will repeat the cycle. I call it, the debt loop. So you're in the loop, having to pay off the debt, and if you're not saving the cash, you're just going to repeat the loop. And it's very easy once you pay off the debt, that cash flow gets freed up, that you just either start taking it all home, or you very easily sign up for the next debt because you can afford the payment. That's not the point. That's not freedom. That's an entire career and lifetime of bondage and slavery to this debt. So,
yeah, it really boils. I was just going to say, it really boils down to changing the behavior. Changing the behavior in the direction that do more with less. So make sure your accounting moves the money around. So the account that you look at that's helping you pay your debt off, that money's automatically being transferred there. So you're not going to spend stuff you don't have or think you have. That way you look and sit there and say, okay, here's how much money I have to work with this month. We're going to make this work. Versus the alternative, No, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, Phil, repeat that. We'll repeat that.
I was just saying, I think, the take-home point in all of this when it comes to debt is that we're not inclined to want to pay things off. Because we have access to unlimited lines of credit and credit cards and so forth, the habit is that the money will always be there and we can finance it. I think one of the things that I always crack up sometimes is, hey, I need another write-off, or I need to spend this money and build this other thing for another write-off. And it's like, so I'm going to take out money, or I want to spend something so that I can get a tax write-off versus just to me that I have a tough time accepting that.
Yeah, it's absolutely ludicrous, but it's something that a lot of people have been trained into. Is I want to avoid taxes at all costs. What can I do? It's like, well, you can always go buy a piece of equipment, and so in most cases though there wasn't enough cash to buy the piece of equipment, and so you borrow money, take out a debt to buy that equipment, which allowed you to take a tax deduction. But then you have to devote, your future profits to repaying that debt instead of having the money to grow the business. I think too that people don't realize, in order for you to, let's say, in order for you to write off, or in order for you to eliminate $40,000 that you owe in taxes, you have to buy a $100,000 piece of equipment. So you have to buy way more and finance way more than the tax that you're trying to avoid. Is that really worth it? And are you actually going to utilize that piece of equipment and turn it into some sort of revenue generating asset for your business? I think that's the other piece of advice, is that don't buy it if you don't need it. Don't buy it if it's not going to add revenue or add profit to your business. Otherwise, you're just repeating this vicious cycle, and it will keep you in debt with a bunch of things you don't need. And at some point, you will actually exhaust the ability to keep using that very foolish strategy. So, if you're a listener and you've behaved that way in the past, or it's been your story every year, or you've gotten that advice, I would tell you that make your business more valuable by making it more profitable and setting aside the money for taxes. And instead of trying to buy a piece of equipment to avoid tax, maybe you need to be talking to somebody else that can give you some more innovative ideas of how you can use the tax code more to your advantage. Reinvest in your business, expanding your business, or again, maybe the best use of those dollars is to pay off debt. Pay the tax and pay off some principal on your debt. You may not feel the immediate gratification of that, but you will long term. It's a better bet. So again, I think in these tough economic times that might be ahead of us with this unprecedented coronavirus, the practices and the people who have a very little debt or no debt approach and the ones who have cash saved up, they are going to live a more, stable, have a more stable outcome. They're going into this with a little bit more confidence, and I think that will make their recovery on the back end better as well. So if that's not you, and we've gone through this, take that as the incredible lesson and the opportunity now that you're still in control of operating differently, thinking differently.
Yeah, I think it's again, with the conversations that you and I have been having, look, it is a tough moment, and it is causing stress in my profession in ways that, obviously I've never seen in 40 plus year veterans have never seen. And we hope and give our support to one another, but it is definitely a good time to think critically. I really wanted to kind of hear your response to that question. The point that I raised about, here's another write-off. I feel like that's something that we often fall into. And what we're really talking about moving forward is being smarter with your dollars, being smarter with supplies and being smarter with how you move your money around and having that savings account for emergencies, and I know you're a big advocate of that. And it'll be good to do a follow-up podcast, Chris. I think the next time that, you and I will talk together, I think in a month or a month and a half, and it'll be good to kind of talk about, I think, where things are at that point, and kind of what you're hearing out there. And I think just to kind of wrap this up, what is it that you're telling your clients that are calling you a little frazzled right now? What's the main thing that you're kind of telling them?
Well, I think, if I was to give you some straight shooter advice, if you're on the side of this where things are very tight, you don't have a lot of cash, and you're very concerned, without going to the details of what you may have to do with your team members and how this all plays out, we don't know how long it's going to last. The best thing you can do right now to prepare for this, if you have the means, is number one, go ahead and hoard your cash. Temporarily, you live on credit cards. Call all of your lenders and ask them what their plan is. Some lenders are already planning on deferring payments for 90 days. They're working right now every day to find out how they can create a solution to this, because we're all interconnected on this. So call your lenders, ask them what they are going to do. Are they going to forgive anything? What's their plan? And take a look at all of your expenses. And if you have expenses that are automated to your credit cards, or automated, the most sensitive ones are any automated ACH drafts out of your bank account, you may want to call those vendors and tell them, look, I'm suspending this, or maybe even call your bank and say, look, I need to suspend anyone being able to draft from my account. And you're going to need to hang tight. And there's going to be some work to be done to clean up things that are owed from this period. But if you have lines of credit, lines of credit can be closed by banks if we go through any kind of bank consolidation. You may want to pull from that line of credit and just park the cash in your bank account to be prepared. But it's on the good side of things. Interest rates have plummeted. It's a great time to call up your lenders. They're going to be starving for people who are in a good position and want to take advantage of things. If you want to refinance your loans and go from interest rates that are in the 5s down to interest rates that are in the 3s, I've even seen some approved recently at 2.95. So we're going to see, some people take advantage of this and really capitalize on their debt positions and fix things. But now is the time, if your office is shutting down, to sit down by yourself with a computer, with your software, your practice management software, with your accounting software. Now's the time to have phone calls with your accountants, to learn your expenses, and you have the opportunity to reorganize things and set yourself up to be more automated when things resume. So you can't just be paralyzed by fear. You have to take action and turn this into an opportunity and a breakthrough moment for you to revolutionize and change your business for the second half of this year. So I think that's the best I can do, Phil, is give people, use this time to become more aware, to set yourself up to, hold out through this unknown period of time, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months, we don't know, but take those principles that you now know about the health stat of having cash on hand and not over leveraging yourself, and write out your plan to fix this on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Because you know what? It is going to go away and everything will come back. There's dentistry is not going anywhere. And I think that any tough journey, any bump along the road, what allows us to own it, what allows us to really seize the day is when we can learn from that and grow stronger and better. And Chris, just thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of dive into this a little bit. I think a lot of people right now are just emotionally overwhelmed, and when they have a chance for that to settle and they have a chance to listen, I think that hopefully some of the stuff we talked about today will give them some hope and encouragement, because, if you put this plan in place and you do this, it will be better like the next time. Because look, if you practice long enough, there could be something else that we didn't know 9/11 was going to happen. We didn't know this was going to happen. And I think if moving forward, you've got this plan in place, you're not going to be stressed about it. I think a lot of us are going to take away the fact of how we handled this. And if something like this happens again, by George, we'll know what to do and it won't be as stressful. Now, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but you never know. So, but thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
It's my pleasure. I'll leave it with this. As the saying goes, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it, and how you grow from this. So I encourage everyone, a crisis is just a point in time. It's a short-term event. Really what you do with it afterwards is where you're going to change your life and your outcome. So you're in charge of it. Take charge of it. Understand you are in control, and everyone will get through this. And I hope that from listening to this, you're able to improve your business and your personal finances when we come through the other side.
Well said.
So thank you very much, Phil, for having me on.
All right. So in our regular tradition, the next time you and I talk, we will not be talking about. We'll do a touch base about kind of where things are at. But what are we going to talk about in our next podcast?
So I think with every time we talk, we're going to we start out high level and we're going to start digging deeper into the granular. So next episode, let's talk about setting up your chart of accounts within your business and learning just the fundamentals of accounting within your business and that chart of accounts. And from there, that will help us dive deeper into the different KPIs in your business. And some of those KPIs will be financial, which I look forward to talking about. And the other KPIs will have to do with your practice, which I look forward to hearing about from you, Phil. So looking forward to the next episode. And once again, thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure, Chris. And a thought I had is maybe when we do some of these KPIs, we can do it with a Zoom with a video, so we can show certain slides and stuff. So maybe we can so when we get into that, we can, and I'm happy to throw up some of my numbers too. And we can some of the fun debates we can have and see and be like, here, where is this going to take us? So we can try to help everybody understand their numbers better. Does that sound good?
I think that'd be super valuable. That sounds awesome.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks, Chris. Thank you to all of you who are listening. Hang in there. We will all have a lot to celebrate here as soon as we come out of this. But everybody stay strong and stay safe. And thanks for everything everybody's doing to try and, keep this from impacting as many people as possible. And Chris, you have a good one, man. Take care.
You the same.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Passionate Pediatric Dentist. If you took away one pearl, one nugget that's helping you practice better with more confidence, then we've done our job. And if you can, please leave us a review, leave us a comment. It would mean the world to us. Now, this podcast was brought to you by Pediatric Dental Directions. And if you want to join a group of like-minded pediatric dentists who share the same mission and vision as you, as what we try to embody in this podcast, then please check us out at www.pddx.us. We have a lot of information. We run a few courses, and we would love for you to check us out and be a part of that if you feel that we can be of help, be of value in your journey in pediatric dentistry. And as always, shoot us an email, ask us questions, and we would be happy to answer them either directly or maybe it's going to be a topic we can put for a podcast. But either way, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, anything worth doing is worth doing well and to the best of your ability. And we are here to support one another. That is the goal of the Passionate Pediatric Dentist. And again, we thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care.